Hi, and welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today, we're going to talk about more, or maybe less, customer service. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My name is Kale Houser, your host for today, tonight, this morning, this evening, wherever you're at. Hey, I got to thinking a little bit more about this whole concept of customer service and how we interact with our marketplace and our clients and things of that nature. And it brought back to mind a story that I had meant to include and I'd kind of forgotten about because I didn't write it down. I'm at that point in my life where I absolutely, as I have thoughts run through my brain, I need to somehow write it down or text it to myself. Because even no matter how much I say, oh, that's a really good idea, I'll totally remember that, in the morning or when I get home, if I'm out and about, to be able to write that down in my notes. And time again, I'll get home and I'll remember that I had some thought about some awesome idea or story that I remembered, but I will have absolutely no idea what it was until eventually my brain will come back around to whatever conditions made me think of that thing. And this was certainly no exception, as I just kind of, after thinking about and going over the customer service episode, got me thinking more about this. So I was in my local VA hospital, Veterans Affairs Medical Center. If you're not familiar with it, this is where disabled veterans that have some form of fashion of disability that they've been awarded through the VA for their service-related injuries, whatever that is, and then they qualify for medical insurance through the VA, and they can go to VA hospitals. And there's clinics and there's hospitals, and we just happen to where I live, a couple miles up the road is like one of the major, not major, but it's one of the bigger hospitals. Like they've got the full facilities there, emergency room and pretty much everything there, dentists and all that kind of stuff, optometry and everything in between. So anyway, and it's always really fascinating going to the VA hospital. It's fascinating on one end of like, cool, here, because obviously, as with most hospitals, the majority of the clientele is older. And you're like, wow, that's really great that all these former service members, whatever war or at whatever during period of time they served in some form or fashion in our military, they are getting, some manner of care that they may need. But it's also a stark reality of just mortality in general, because there's lots of old people and their bodies are breaking down in all kinds of different ways. And you see that and are reminded of that every time I go into the VA. I am by far the youngest person that is usually in there outside of the workers as far as clientele goes when I go in there. So this particular day, not too long ago, and I will tell you, not to belay my story and my point here, but you get all kinds, because as with any government agency, you have good experiences and you've got bad experiences. There are pros and there are cons. And I think we kind of all understand the cons in the form of like DMVs and things of that nature. And I've walked out of the VA, walking to the parking lot and seen older gentlemen that are in their cars, and as they're driving away, they're giving these like giant, flipping off the building of the VA because something has happened. I've been in situations where, again, I'm walking to my car in the parking lot, and the parking there is horrible, by the way. It's absolutely horrendous for all these old people to have to walk like a half mile from their car in the blazing Florida heat just to get to the front entrance of the VA facility. But besides the point. So I'm walking to my car, and there's this older gentleman. He's probably, somewhere between 80 and 90. And he's struggling a little bit. He's getting his little, those little kind of walker / seat things, mobility deals. He's getting that out of his car, and he's trying to, get it all situated while getting his car locked up. And I just kind of, as I'm walking, I'm like, sir, do you need any help? No, actually, he was getting into a wheelchair. That's what it was. Because I was like, oh, minimum, I can at least wheel him over, so he's not having to huff and puff through this heat. It was legitimately very hot out that day because it was like 1 p.m. And I go, sir, do you need some help? I don't mind giving you a hand if you would like. As nice as possible as I could, fellow veteran helping another veteran out. And he, was so surly. He essentially just started going off on the VA about medical records and how he went up to this location for these tests, and now he had to come back, and he had proof of all this stuff. And essentially, I was the little dink in the dam that released the whole floodgates of all the problems he was having. And he absolutely did not want my help and all this kind of stuff. And I just, it was one of those moments of just, okay, good luck with that. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I kind of just went about my way. But so getting back to the point of this podcast and this episode of more or less customer service, because this relates back to my podcast 2 podcasts ago, so not the last one, but the one previous, about customer service and those representatives who represent your company to the public at large. And this isn't as much directly related to that of, because the VA, it already has a reputation. To overcome the negative aspects of that, there's virtually nothing that the VA could or is even capable of doing because they are a governmental agency, a bureaucracy. And there's not much they can do to get worse, right? Well, I guess you could always get worse, but while maintaining a level of non-criminality, there's not much they could do to get worse, right? Because you've got veterans that legitimately are committing suicide on the doorsteps and lighting themselves on fire. Like, this happens because of the service has been so bad or mismanaged or poor in certain cases or scenarios. And this isn't that, right? Not a story about anything that dramatic, but it's comical but sad and frustrating all at the same time. I'm standing in line at the pharmacy. I'm there to pick up a refill of my prescription. And at our VA, at this location, there's, they've got the windows. As with any pharmacy, like, even though you're already in a government secured facility with guards and all that kind of stuff, you have to show ID to get in. It's not like your neighborhood CVS where they could pull a gun and jump and get the coding or anything like that. But they're still full on behind the big bulletproof glass, and you're talking to them through the little microphone, and they've got the little pass-through like Fort Knox door to get your medication and stuff. And there's these 3 windows, and only one of them is open at the time, of course. But then on the side is the pharmacist windows. So this is the equivalent of like, hey, I need to have a pharmacist actually tell me how to use this medication or things like that. But they do it for all kinds of different reasons than just that. If you just had questions or all kinds of different stuff. So this particular day, I'm standing in line for the pickup window, and there's a massive line to talk to the pharmacist line over here on the side. And for whatever reason, they weren't as secure. It was essentially just 2 little desks with a divider, and then they had the classic, protect yourself from the most deadly virus on the planet, plexiglass up. But of course, at the VA, they're still wearing the archaic and completely useless masks, which is a frustration for everybody. And now you mix in with that, what happens to most people as they get older? They start to lose their hearing. What happens when you put a big piece of cloth over somebody's face? You can't hear as well, right? Your words don't come across as clearly. And especially with people that have started to lose their hearing, they start to rely more for essentially kind of lip reading to help them understand what is being said to them when they can't quite hear everything. So you mix in those 2 things in that kind of setting, and it's a recipe for disaster. And this is exactly what was happening today. Or that day. And so I'm standing there, and you can't help because the older gentleman, I'm guessing he was 85-ish, he wasn't decrepit by any stretch. He had a cane, but he wasn't like, completely invalid. He was able to walk around and, appeared to have his faculties about him. And he was standing at this pharmacist's desk, and they had already been talking before I got there in line. And so I'm kind of picking this up mid of whatever was happening. But there was essentially this miscommunication that was happening between the 2 of them, the pharmacist, and I don't know if there was an actual pharmacist or a pharmacist assistant, whatever it was, and this older gentleman who is the veteran, in this case, the patient. And they're going back and forth, and he's essentially not getting helped to his satisfaction of getting his questions answered. And so at the VA, we always give our last name and then the last 4 digits of our Social Security. That's how they look us up in their system. So she's essentially thinking or not realizing the audience that she's talking to, this pharmacist gal. And she's trying to get out of this gentleman his last name and the last 4 digits of his Social Security number so she can look him up in the system. But here's where the breakdown came. She's talking to him like I'm talking to you right now, but without a microphone, as if we were talking. But remember, she's got her mask on. So now she's talking to him like this, if you can even still hear me through my microphone a little bit. And now, but beyond that, she's now sitting 3 or 4 feet behind this big old plexiglass window that's further obscuring the volume of her voice because she's not bothering to speak up. It's like she's at her dinner table talking with her husband or, whatever scenario you want to talk about, but like across from somebody and just having a normal casual conversation. Beyond taking into the account of, and this is what is really kind of tragic about the whole thing, is you deal with these veterans all day, every day. By now, you should be picking up on, hey, I probably need to project my voice a little bit more. Just the fact that this person is like in his 80s or 90s, and a natural course of human aging is we lose our hearing. We're no longer as sharp in our hearing, as a kind of a general rule. But it was this him not being able to hear her, and then his frustration rising because, right, he couldn't hear her, he couldn't see her lips or her face to understand the expressions that were going on. And they basically got frustrated with each other to the point where the pharmacist gal goes, I got to take a break. And she literally walked away. I'm going, what the heck? Not only is she no longer helping this person standing in front of her that needs her help, she's the only one that can help him because they've set up this system where the pharmacist is the only one that can help him. Okay, better or worse. But there's like 6 or 7 other people behind that are now not being helped because this gal, and I'm going to say it was all her fault. She was the one that had the tools, the capability, and the responsibility to ask the right questions and make sure she was heard and understood by her client, by her patient, in a manner that he could understand. It's like screaming at somebody, it's the classic, they do it in the movies all the time that, you've got a language barrier, they don't speak your language, so you just raise your voice and you talk louder. You ignore the root cause problem of they don't speak your language, so it doesn't matter if you're screaming or whispering, they don't understand what you're saying. And it was that, but on the reverse side. He spoke the language, but he couldn't hear you. He couldn't see your lips. There was no communication going on. And this goes back to the customer service aspect of it. She, as a representative of the Veterans Affairs Administration of Veterans Affairs, whatever it is, was completely failing in her duties as a customer service representative and interacting with their clients, with their patients. And what the unfortunate part was, and I didn't see it, I could only hear it, a gentleman came out and essentially was accusing this older gentleman, the patient, of being mean to the pharmacist, which he wasn't. As a third-party observer of the whole situation, at least the last half of it, and the guy said, I'm not mad at her. He's like, I'm just trying to figure out, XYZ about his medication. But this breakdown of the basic information, sir, I would love to help you. Absolutely, I will help you. That's what I'm here for. What is your last name? Oh, can you spell that for me? Right, if it's an unusual one. And what are the last 4 digits of your social security number? Every veteran has this at the hip ready when asked. Like, we know that's any interaction with any sort of official system thing where there's records involved or medication involved, we know that's just part of it. But because this gal, for whatever was going on, right, benefit of the doubt on her end, maybe she had all kinds of whatever happening in her life that was impeding this. But it became this issue that should have never been an issue because of her complete lack of recognition of the situation that she was in and failing to adapt to it in a manner that would have created success for all involved. And it goes beyond her, right? It goes into her supervision, her management, the culture of the VA in general. How do you interact with your customers? Is it to where your representatives, whether they be salesmen, outside salesmen, inside salesmen, front desk, your person answering your phones, customer service representatives, you have actual those, your marketing person, have they been trained to think through situations when there are those breakdowns of communications, to step back for a second and just go, whoa, okay, what's going on here? And provide the customer, the clients, the vendors that benefit of the doubt and say, hey, I apologize. We must have had some miscommunication. I apologize for that. Let's start over. What's your last name and last 4 of your social so I can look you up in our system and we can get on the same page? Cool. Right? It's not that he is failing to give that to you because he doesn't want to give it to you. He's failing to give it to you because he doesn't know that's what you were asking. because of these communication barriers that have been, these artificial communication barriers that have been put in place. Right? So think about that. As the leader in your business, are there artificial barriers to communication that you've put in place that don't need to be there, i.e. masks, random plexiglass that's going to magically stop the most deadly virus in the planet, right? Or is there a lack of training? Is there a lack of understanding? Are you even role playing with your customer service representatives and salespeople when they run into these situations? Because they are inevitable. People disagree all the time. We have miscommunications all the time that create conflict and confusion. Have you even run through these scenarios? Do you take that event that happened last week with Susie over there and say, all right, Jan, this is what happened. I'm going to be this all right customer. How do you handle it? Let's talk it through so we get on the same page. This is how I want you to handle it as a company. This is our policy of how you should handle it. Right? Get people on your same page. So just like I talked about in the previous episode, you need to make sure everyone has that buy-in and they're on the same page with you as far as what your culture is in your company for that level of customer service. So a little bit longer of a rant. I apologize for that. I didn't mean to, but just lots of things were kind of popping up in my brain that were somewhat, I guess, kind of related to this. So take it for what it's worth. And if you do find yourself in that position, because he could have easily too gone the route of, hold on, sir, or hold on, ma'am, Miss Pharmacist, I'm just trying to figure out what medication I need, or, can I take this medication with this medication, right? Whatever his issue was that was going on. But I will say I got my refill and she still hadn't come out because she, had reached whatever her limit was with dealing with people. And it's, to be fair, not an easy job dealing with veterans because most of them are irate in some form or fashion with the level of care that they're getting from the VA. So it tends to just kind of further replicate and exasperate each interaction that happens with all the various departments, whether that be records or, getting their blood drawn or anything happening. And then you mix in they've just trekked a mile, quarter mile, 3/4 a mile through a Florida summer just to get to the front door, and now told, put on this mask and restrict your breathing and all this kind of stuff is just beyond ludicrous. But besides the point. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a little bit of value to at least be able to read between the lines of the point I was trying to make. Shoot me an email if not, or leave a comment, subscription would be fantastic, no matter where you're at in the world. Have a fantastic afternoon. Talk to you soon. Bye.